The USS Horizon drifted through the empty darkness of space, its hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. Captain Lisa Martinez walked through the ship's corridors, checking on her crew during their routine deep space mission. The ship had been exploring the outer edges of human territory for 3 months, mapping new star systems and searching for signs of life. Lieutenant Jake Morrison sat at his station in the communications room, listening to the usual background noise of space, radio waves from distant pulsars mixed with the quiet hum of the ship's systems. He had been doing this job for 5 years, and most days brought nothing but static and electromagnetic interference. Today felt different, though. Something was cutting through the cosmic noise, faint but persistent. "Captain Martinez to the bridge," Jake called over the intercom. His voice carried a note of excitement that made several crew members look up from their work. Lisa arrived within minutes, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She had commanded the Horizon for 2 years and knew her crew well enough to recognize when something important was happening. Jake's usually calm demeanor showed signs of tension. "What do you have, Lieutenant?" she asked, settling into the captain's chair. "I'm picking up a signal, Captain. It's not like anything in our databases. The pattern is too regular to be natural, but it's not human either." Jake adjusted his headset and played the transmission through the bridge speakers. The sound filled the room with a series of mathematical sequences mixed with what sounded like music. The pattern repeated every few minutes, growing slightly weaker each time. Dr. Amanda Foster, the ship's language expert, had arrived on the bridge and was listening intently. "How long has this been transmitting?" Amanda asked, her scientific curiosity clearly aroused. "At least 6 hours, maybe longer. The signal is coming from deep space, well beyond any known human settlements." Jake brought up a star chart on the main screen, showing the signal's origin point as a red dot in an unexplored region of the galaxy. Captain Martinez studied the display. The source was hundreds of light years away, in a direction no human ship had ever traveled. Could it be some kind of natural phenomenon we haven't encountered before? Amanda shook her head. The mathematical sequences are too complex. This has to be artificial. Someone or something is deliberately sending this message. "Can you decode it?" Lisa asked. "I'll need time. The language patterns are completely foreign, but there are universal mathematical concepts that might give us a starting point." Amanda was already making notes on her tablet, her mind racing with possibilities. The next 12 hours passed slowly as Amanda worked on the translation. The entire crew knew something big was happening. Word spread through the ship that they might have discovered the first evidence of alien intelligence. Some crew members were excited, others worried about what this might mean for humanity. Captain Martinez found herself checking on Amanda's progress every few hours. The doctor had barely slept, surviving on coffee and determination. Mathematical formulas covered every surface in her small laboratory, and she had filled 3 notebooks with her attempts to understand the alien language. "Any progress?" Lisa asked during one of her visits. Amanda looked up from her work, her eyes red from exhaustion. "I think I'm starting to understand the basic structure. They're using mathematical principles that are universal, but applying them in ways I've never seen before. It's like they're thinking in dimensions we can barely comprehend." "But you can translate it?" "Some of it. Give me a few more hours." Lieutenant Morrison continued monitoring the signal, noting that it was getting weaker. Whatever was sending the message was either moving away or losing power. The thought that they might lose this historic first contact drove everyone to work harder. Finally, after 18 hours of constant effort, Amanda called the senior staff to the conference room. Her hands shook slightly as she activated the holographic display showing her translation work. "I've managed to decode about 60% of the message," she began. What I found is disturbing. This isn't just a greeting or an attempt at communication. It's a distress call. The room fell silent. Captain Martinez leaned forward in her chair. What kind of distress? The beings calling themselves the Cathver are facing extinction. They're describing an enemy they call the Dominar Empire, a force that has been hunting them across the galaxy. Amanda's voice grew quieter as she continued. According to this message, the Dominar don't just conquer worlds. They systematically destroy entire civilizations, keeping some survivors as slaves, while eliminating the rest. Commander Steve Carter, the ship's tactical officer, spoke up. Are they asking for help? In a way, yes. But I don't think they expect anyone to actually come to their aid. The message reads more like a final testament, a record of their civilization, that they're broadcasting in hopes that someone will remember them after they're gone. Amanda activated another section of the display, showing star charts and coordinates. They've included their location and detailed information about their culture, their history, their scientific achievements. It's like they're putting together a time capsule and throwing it into space. How far away are they? Lisa asked. The signal originated from a system about 400 light years from here, based on the transmission delay and the weakening signal strength. I estimate they sent this message at least 6 months ago. We might already be too late. The weight of this revelation settled over the room. They were potentially witnessing the final moments of an entire species, listening to their last words as they faced annihilation. The excitement of first contact had been replaced by the sobering reality of what that contact represented. There's something else, Amanda continued. The Cathver have been tracking the Dominar Empire's movements for decades. According to their data, this enemy has destroyed hundreds of civilizations. They move from system to system, consuming everything in their path. Captain Martinez stood and walked to the large window overlooking space. The stars that had seemed so peaceful and beautiful now felt different, knowing that somewhere among them, an entire species was fighting for survival against an enemy that showed no mercy. Captain, Jake called from the communications station. The signal is getting much weaker. I don't think we'll be able to receive it much longer. Lisa turned back to her crew. She could see the same thoughts in their faces that were running through her own mind. They were probably the only humans who knew about this threat, the only ones who had heard the Cathvar's final plea. The decision she made in the next few minutes could change everything, set a course for the Cathvar system. She said finally, "Maximum speed. Captain, that's well outside our patrol area." "Earth Command will demand an explanation," Commander Carter warned. "Then we'll give them one. We can't just ignore this. If there's even a chance that some of them are still alive, we have to try to help." Lisa's voice carried the authority that had made her a respected captain, but also the compassion that made her crew willing to follow her anywhere. As the USS Horizon changed course and jumped to faster-than-light speed, none of them could have imagined how this single decision would ultimately trigger humanity's greatest war. The USS Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Cathvar system. Captain Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge, watching the main screen as it showed a solar system unlike anything humanity had ever seen. 3 suns orbited, each other in a complex dance, casting rainbow-colored light across 7 planets. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Jake Morrison from his station. "Look at that." The 4th planet glowed with a soft blue-green light. Even from this distance, they could see that it was covered in what looked like vast cities that sparkled like jewels. Geometric patterns of light stretched across entire continents, creating artwork visible from space. This was clearly the work of a civilization far more advanced than humanity. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple ship signatures in the system," reported Commander Steve Carter, his voice tense. "Some appear to be Cathvar vessels, but there are others, much larger. They're not broadcasting any identification signals. Doctor. Amanda Foster worked frantically at her station, trying to establish communication with the planet below. I'm picking up transmissions in the HFY language. They're still alive down there, but the signals are getting weaker. A new voice suddenly filled the bridge. It was melodic, almost musical, but carried an unmistakable tone of sadness and fear. Amanda quickly ran it through her translation programs. There? Trying to talk to us, she said. Someone down there knows we're here. Lisa nodded. Open a channel, Doctor. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at their first alien being. The HFY had a humanoid shape, but was taller, and more slender than humans. Their skin had a silver-blue tint, and their large eyes held wisdom that seemed to span centuries. When the being spoke, their voice carried the weight of immense sorrow. I am Elder HFY of the HFY. The translation came through clearly. You have come far to witness our final moments. We thank you for bearing witness to our existence. Captain Martinez stepped forward. Elder HFY, I am Captain Lisa Martinez of the human vessel USS Horizon. We received your distress call. How can we help you? The Elder's expression showed both surprise and sadness. Help? You are brave to offer, but I fear it is too late. The Dominar fleet arrived 3 days ago. They have begun their final assault on our world. Soon, there will be no HFY left to remember. What exactly are the Dominar? Amanda asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. Elder HFY's image wavered as explosions lit up the sky behind him. They are destroyers, consumers of worlds. For 800 years, they have swept across this galaxy, leaving nothing but death in their wake. They do not simply conquer. They torture entire populations for entertainment. They keep some alive as slaves, forcing them to watch as their families and friends are killed slowly. The bridge fell silent. Commander Carter's hands tightened on his weapons console. How many ships do they have? In this system, nearly 200 vessels. But their empire spans thousands of worlds. No species has ever successfully fought. They are too numerous, too cruel, and too powerful. Suddenly, alarms began ringing throughout the horizon. Jake's hands flew over his controls. Captain, we're being scanned by unknown ships. 3 large vessels are approaching our position. The main screen split, showing the approaching Dominar ships alongside Elder HFY's transmission. The alien vessels were massive, dark, and covered in what looked like spikes and weapon ports. They moved with a predatory grace that made everyone on the bridge uncomfortable. Elder, we need to move to a safer position, Lisa said. There is no safety from the Dominar, HFY replied. But before they find you, please accept this gift. It is all that remains of our civilization. Data began flooding into the horizons. Computers. Thousands of years of HFY history, art, science, and culture were being transmitted at incredible speed. Amanda watched in amazement as her screens filled with alien music, poetry, mathematical discoveries, and philosophical works. Captain, Carter called urgently. The Dominar ships are powering weapons. They're moving to attack us. Take us out of here now. Lisa ordered Dot as the horizon began to retreat. The crew watched in horror as the Dominar ships turned toward the HFY planet. What followed was unlike anything in human military doctrine. The Dominar didn't simply bomb the cities. They used some kind of energy weapon that seemed to cause incredible pain to anyone it touched. The beautiful geometric lights on the planet's surface began going dark, one by one. They're torturing the entire population, Amanda whispered her, face pale as she watched the translation data from the planet below. The Dominar are broadcasting the screams across all frequencies. They want everyone to hear what they're doing. Elder HFY appeared on screen one final time. Behind him, His city was burning, and the sounds of destruction filled the air. Remember us, humans. Remember what the Dominar do to peaceful worlds. They will find your species eventually. When they do not let them take you as easily as they took us. The transmission cut to static. For long minutes, the bridge was silent, except for the hum of the ship's engines. The crew watched as the last lights on the HFY world went dark. An entire civilization that had existed for thousands of years was gone in a matter of hours. Commander Carter broke the silence. Captain, the Dominar ships are moving in our direction. They're faster than our ship. Lisa looked at her crew. These were good people, scientists and explorers, who had signed up to discover new worlds and make peaceful contact with alien life. Instead, they had witnessed genocide on a scale that humanity had never imagined possible. How long until they reach us? She asked. 6 hours, maybe 7 if we push the engines to maximum. Dr. Foster was still staring at the data that HFY had transmitted. Captain, this information is incredible. The HFY were thousands of years ahead of us. In science and technology, they had solved problems we're still working on. Their art and culture were beautiful beyond description. And now they're all dead, Jake said quietly. Lisa made a decision that would change everything. We're going back to Earth, immediately, and we're taking this recording with us. Captain? Carter looked confused. Everyone needs to see this. Every human in the galaxy needs to know what the Dominar Empire does to peaceful species. The HFY died believing that no one could stop these monsters. Maybe they were right about themselves, but they don't know humans. As the USS Horizon jumped back into faster-than-light travel, racing toward human space with the Dominar fleet in pursuit, Captain Martinez was already planning what would happen when they reached Earth. The images of the HFY genocide would be broadcast to every human world, every military base, every government building. The Dominar had made a mistake. They had let witnesses escape, and those witnesses were carrying something that would awaken a sleeping giant. Humanity was about to discover that there were things in the universe worth fighting for, even against impossible odds. The HFY had died believing they were alone, but their sacrifice was about to trigger a response that would shake the galaxy. The USS Horizon's engines pushed toward maximum speed, carrying the most important message in human history back to Earth. Behind them, the Dominar ships followed, unaware that they were chasing the spark that would ignite humanity's greatest war. The USS Horizon arrived at Earth after the longest week in Captain Lisa Martinez's life. The Dominar ships had followed them for 3 days before finally turning back, apparently deciding that one small human vessel wasn't worth the chase. Lisa knew they had made a terrible mistake. Within hours of docking at Luna Station, the recordings from the HFY system were being broadcast across every human world. The images were horrifying, but necessary. Humanity needed to see what they were facing. Lisa stood in the packed briefing room at Earth Military Command, watching as admirals and generals from every nation stared at the footage in stunned silence. The beautiful HFY cities burning, the systematic torture of an entire species. And Elder Zephyhi's final words played on screens around the room. General Patricia Hayes, the most senior military officer in human space, spoke first. How many ships did you say they had in that one system? Nearly 200, General. And according to the HFY data, that was just a small part of their empire. Lisa's voice was steady, but everyone could hear the underlying anger. What about their technology? Asked Admiral Richard Stone, a man known for his strategic thinking. Are they more advanced than us? Dr. Amanda Foster stepped forward with her analysis. The HFY were centuries ahead of us in most areas, and the Dominar destroyed them in hours. Based on the ship scans we managed to take, the Dominar vessels are larger and more heavily armed than anything we have. The room erupted in worried conversations. Some officials talked about hiding, others about negotiating. Lisa watched their faces and saw fear beginning to take hold. Then something unexpected happened. A young lieutenant named Danny Clark, who had been quietly listening in the back, stood up. "General Hayes, permission to speak?" "Go ahead, Lieutenant." "With respect, ma'am, I don't think running or hiding is going to work. These Dominar things have been doing this for 800 years. They've probably heard every excuse and seen every attempt to surrender. The only thing they haven't seen is someone who refuses to give up." An older colonel laughed bitterly. "Son, did you not hear what the captain just told us? They have thousands of ships, and they've never been defeated." Danny's jaw set stubbornly. "So what, sir?" "That just means nobody has tried hard enough yet." The simple statement hung in the air. Lisa felt a spark of hope as she saw similar expressions on faces around the room. This was what made humans different from the Kethfor and all the other species the Dominar had destroyed. When faced with impossible odds, humans didn't look for reasons to surrender. They looked for ways to fight. General Hayes stood up. "I'm calling an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Every nation, every colony, every corporate fleet needs to see this footage. We have decisions to make." The next 72 hours changed human civilization forever. The images of the Kethvar genocide were broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. The reaction was swift and unified in a way that surprised even the military leaders. On Mars, factory workers volunteered to work double shifts building weapons. On the mining stations around Jupiter, crews offered to stay an extra year to provide raw materials. Even the normally fractious colonial governments put aside their differences and offered everything they had to the war effort. Dr. Kevin Walsh, humanity's leading weapons designer, worked around the clock with teams of scientists to understand the Kethver technology that had been transmitted to the horizon. They discovered energy shielding techniques that could protect human ships, and weapons designs that could punch through Dominar armor. But the most important discovery was something the Kethvar had never developed: the human ability to build ships that could take massive damage and keep fighting. The Kethver had focused on avoiding conflict, building beautiful but fragile vessels. Humans had learned to build things that could survive in the harshest environments imaginable. Engineer Nicole Rodriguez led the crash program to build a new class of warships. These vessels combined human durability with Kethver technology, creating something that had never existed before. The ships were ugly compared to the graceful Kethver designs, but they were built to absorb punishment and keep fighting. Admiral Stone was given command of the largest military buildup in human history. Shipyards that had been building commercial vessels were converted to military production. Training centers that had been preparing colonists were now turning out soldiers. The most remarkable change was in the people themselves. Humans who had never shown interest in military service lined up at recruitment centers. Teenagers lied about their ages to join the fleet. Retired veterans came out of retirement to serve again. Lisa found herself promoted to admiral and given command of a fun new battle group. As she walked through the shipyards, she marveled at what humanity had accomplished in just 3 months. Where there had once been a few hundred small military vessels, there were now thousands of warships under construction. But it wasn't just the ships that impressed her. It was the attitude of the crews. These weren't professional soldiers who had been trained to follow orders. These were ordinary people who had seen the footage of the Kethver genocide and decided that such a thing would never happen to humanity. Engineer Rodriguez approached her during one of these inspections. "Admiral, we've got the first squadron of new ships ready for testing. Want to see what we've built?" Lisa followed her to the main construction bay, where a dozen warships sat ready for launch. They were angular and brutal-looking, covered in armor plating and weapon systems. They looked like what they were, ships built by a species that had learned to fight for survival. We've incorporated every piece of useful technology from the HFY database, Nicole explained. Energy shields, improved engines, better weapons. But we've also added things the HFY never thought of. Redundant systems, armored compartments, self-repair capabilities. These ships are designed to keep fighting even after taking damage that would destroy a normal vessel. As they toured the ships, Lisa noticed something else. The crews were different from any military force she had ever seen. They came from every background, every nation, every walk of life. What united them wasn't training or discipline. It was Purpose. Commander Tony Mitchell, a former commercial pilot who now commanded one of the new ships, summed it up perfectly. Admiral, we all saw what happened to the HFY. We know what these Dominar monsters do to peaceful species. They picked the wrong galaxy to invade. The transformation was complete when the first reports arrived from the Outer Rim. Dominar scout ships had been spotted approaching human space. They were still months away, but they were coming. General Hayes called a final briefing before the fleet departed. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to face an enemy that has destroyed hundreds of civilizations. They expect us to run, hide, or surrender. They've never encountered a species that responds to threats by building the largest military force in galactic history. She looked around the room at the faces of humanity's military leaders. The HFY died believing they were alone. But they weren't. They had us. And now we're going to show the Dominar Empire what happens when you murder the wrong species. As the human fleet prepared to depart Earth, carrying more firepower than had ever been assembled by a single species, one thing was clear. The Dominar had made a critical error. They had let witnesses escape, and those witnesses belonged to a species that responded to genocide with overwhelming force. The war was about to begin. The Dominar fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space, expecting to find another helpless species waiting to be destroyed. Instead, they found Admiral Richard Stone's armada waiting for them in perfect battle formation. 3,000 human warships hung in space like a wall of steel and determination. The Dominar had never seen anything like it. In 800 years of conquest, no species had ever assembled such a massive force to oppose them. Admiral Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of her flagship, a UHS Defiance, watching the enemy. Fleet approach. The Dominar ships were impressive, dark, and menacing, with their spike-covered hulls and massive weapon arrays. But Lisa had seen what they did to the HFY, and that memory burned away any fear she might have felt. Enemy fleet consists of approximately 800 vessels, reported Commander Tony Mitchell from his position at the tactical station. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Let's hear what they have to say, Lisa ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was cold and arrogant. The translation system converted the alien words into English, but couldn't hide the contempt in the speaker's tone. Unknown species, you will surrender immediately and prepare for processing. Resistance will result in extended suffering for your populations. Lisa activated the fleet-wide communication system. This is Admiral Lisa Martinez of the Human Defense Force. We have seen what you did to the HFY. We know what you are. You will not find us as easy to kill as them. There was a pause, then harsh laughter from the Dominar commander. You witnessed the fate of the HFY and still choose to fight? Your species must be even more primitive than we thought. Very well. We will enjoy breaking you. The Dominar fleet began to advance, their ships moving in the same predatory formation they had used against countless other species. They had perfected their tactics over centuries of conquest, and they expected this battle to follow the same pattern as all the others. They were wrong. Admiral Stone's voice crackled over the fleet communications. All ships, implement Battle Plan Alpha. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every species that ever begged for mercy from these monsters. The human fleet split into smaller groups, each one moving to execute a different part of the battle plan. This wasn't the desperate last stand of a doomed species. This was the calculated assault of a military force that had spent months preparing for this exact moment. Commander Mitchell led the first wave of human fighters, small fast ships that darted between the massive Dominar vessels like angry wasps. The Dominar had expected the humans to meet them head-on in traditional battle formation. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by enemies attacking from every direction. "Enemy shields are down on the lead ship," reported Lieutenant Susan Gray from her fighter squadron, switching to armor-piercing rounds. The human weapons, enhanced with Kethphea technology, tore through Dominar armor like paper. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries began exploding under the concentrated fire of human battle groups. But the Dominar weren't helpless. Their return fire was devastating, and human ships began dying as well. The difference was that human crews had been trained to keep fighting even when their ships were crippled. Where other species would have surrendered, humans found ways to continue the battle. The UHS Revenge, commanded by Captain Gary Foster, took a direct hit. That destroyed half her hull. Instead of retreating, Foster ordered his crew to ram the enemy vessel. The collision destroyed both ships, but it also opened a gap in the Dominar formation that 3 human battle groups exploited. "This is impossible," the Dominar commander's voice cut through the battle noise. "No species fights like this. Why don't you surrender when you're damaged?" Admiral Martinez responded while directing her ships to concentrate fire on the Dominar flagship. "Because we're not like the other species you've destroyed. We don't fight to win. We fight because some things are worth dying for." The battle raged for hours. Space filled with the wreckage of ships from both sides. But slowly, the human tactics began to work. The Dominar had always relied on fear and overwhelming force to win their battles. They had never faced an enemy that refused to be afraid. Commander Mitchell's ship, the UHS Vengeance, had lost most of its weapons, but still functioned. He spotted a group of Dominar ships trying to break through the human lines to attack Earth directly. Without hesitation, he ordered his crew to abandon ship and then piloted the vessel directly into the enemy formation. The explosion took out 5 Dominar vessels and stopped their advance cold. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Human crews that would have been considered defeated by any normal standard kept fighting with damaged weapons and failing life support systems. They had seen the footage of the Kethver genocide, and they would rather die than let such a thing happen to their own species. The turning point came when Captain Helen Ross, commanding the UHS Determination, managed to break through the Dominar defenses and target their command ship directly. The massive vessel had been directing the enemy fleet throughout the battle, but it was designed for intimidation rather than combat. "All remaining ships, concentrate fire on the flagship, Admiral," Stone ordered. "Let's end this." The combined firepower of the human fleet focused on the Dominar command vessel. The enemy ship's shields failed under the assault, and then its armor began to crack. Finally, the ship exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the battlefield. With their command ship destroyed, the Dominar fleet began to fall apart. Ships that had fought with perfect coordination suddenly found themselves acting independently. The human fleet pressed their advantage, hunting down the remaining enemy vessels. But the most important moment came when the surviving Dominar ships tried to retreat. Instead of letting them escape, Admiral Martinez made a decision that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. "All ships pursue the enemy. We're not letting any of them get away." The human fleet chased the fleeing Dominar ships across 3 star systems. Every enemy vessel was hunted down and destroyed. When the last Dominar ship exploded, The galaxy became a little bit safer. A victory had come at a terrible cost. Nearly half the human fleet was destroyed, and thousands of brave crews had died in the battle. But their sacrifice had achieved something that no other species had managed in 800 years. They had defeated the Dominar Empire. Word of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. Species that had hidden from the Dominar for generations began to emerge from their hiding places. The HFY cultural database was used to establish a new colony, ensuring that their civilization would continue. 6 months later, Admiral Martinez stood in the memorial garden on Luna, looking at the wall of names that honored those who had died in the battle. The HFY memorial stood nearby, a beautiful crystal structure that played their music and displayed their art. A young ensign approached her. "Admiral, the new recruits are asking about the battle. They want to know how." "We knew we could win." Lisa smiled sadly. "We didn't know, Ensign. We just knew that some things are worth fighting for, even when you can't win. The HFY taught us that by their example. They showed us what happens when good people do nothing in the face of evil." As she walked away, Lisa thought about Elder Sci-Fi's final words. The HFY had died believing they were alone, but they had been wrong. Their distress call had reached the one species in the galaxy that would respond to genocide with overwhelming force. The galaxy was safer now, protected by a species that had learned an important lesson. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from superior weapons or tactics, but from the simple refusal to let injustice go unanswered.